Previously on agentpalmer.com, I've started The Voyage of the Gerald Shannara Trilogy by Terry Brooks, a book review of Lost Moon, the basis for the Apollo 13 film, and my mother and Sarah are now texting buddies, which makes sense, I guess. This is the Palmer Files, episode 13, featuring Neil Cetrangulo of the podcast Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks. He's a podcaster, a vlogger, and a friend, but we don't discuss any of those things much. This episode is about anxiety. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 13th episode is Neil Cetrangulo, who is half of both Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks, a couples podcast he hosts with his wife, and Halos and Heathens, a spinoff vlog and YouTube channel. Both brands overlap, just to let you know. But all of that is a means to say I know Neil because of his podcast, and I knew ahead of time that he would be a great person to have on for this particular episode. As mentioned, this episode is about anxiety. Anxiety, which is different than being anxious. A point of contention I don't think I will ever tire of explaining to people. Neil is someone who I don't have to explain that to, though, as he also lives with anxiety, as you'll soon find out. And how did I know Neil would be great for this episode? He's been open about his anxiety on his own show many times before, and he's had plenty of opportunity, as Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks is over 300 episodes, and that includes a short hiatus. He was also a co-host of the podcast previously known as Reasons Are Several, which may return at some point under a new title, and I'll be sure to let you know when that happens. But all of this is to say that I've come to know Neil and we've become friends. So what are you in for with this episode? Well, anxiety, of course, but also irrationality, acceptance, expectation, experience, origins, and even altruism, all of which relate to anxiety. Anxiety is defined generally as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. Or, psychiatrically, it's defined as a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension, typically with compulsive behavior or panic attacks. But there isn't much generality to experiencing it. It is a deeply personal thing, especially in the moment. And for all that Neil and I have in common with each other or anyone else who deals with this on a regular basis, anxiety is perhaps the most personal of issues, and as such varies greatly from person to person. Lastly, before the usual where you can reach us bit before the episode itself starts in proper, I want to explain and make sure everyone knows that neither Neil nor I are medical professionals, nor are we trying to give out medical advice. We are talking about living with our anxiety, and we are explaining what works for us to pass an attack or get through the day, or what preemptive measures we might take, or reactive measures we might use to mitigate an attack or episode of high anxiety in any form. None of this is medical advice. Please do not mistake it as such. This is what works for us. So, if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, and you can tweet Neil at AngelsFreak7. You can hear him on the Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks podcast with his co-host and wife Annalise, wherever you are listening to this show right now, and you can visit DAFPod, that's DAPFpod.com, or halosandheathens.com, depending on what you're looking for. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and remember, all of these links will be available in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Neil, I have anxiety. How about you?
Such a blessing, isn't it? I mean, it's something special. It is something special.
There are, like I understand from an evolutionary standpoint, we're supposed to be anxious, but anxious and anxiety, not the same thing.
No, and I mean, yeah, there is that survival quality to being anxious and a little bit on edge, but the anxiety thing is definitely not for me a positive as far as I like the fight or flight thing. This is anxiety for me is definitely one of those, like, what happened to my brain and why won't it stop?
So I'm basically in a similar boat, but in a very different way, right? Like it is. So I'll come forward with my origin story. I didn't have it for the longest time. I went through high school. I went through college. No anxiety whatsoever. I mean, the usual. Oh, I don't want to go to the dance, or like, oh, I'm a little nervous for this test, whatever it is.
Sure. Right.
I graduated from college and I got a job and things were going fairly well. I was still living at home, but I mean, such is life. And I was still living in Pennsylvania. I went to see my beloved Baltimore Orioles in Baltimore and had my first panic attack at Camden Yards.
Oh, wow.
So I'm at a baseball game with my uncle. My grandfather was still alive, who lived just outside of Baltimore. So my uncle, who is not unfamiliar with anxiety, put up with me, like, kind of watching, but going to the bathroom all the time, because my anxiety from that first moment and ever since has, like, manifested itself as, like, nausea, and you're going to throw up at any moment. And one of the things that is unfortunate about that scenario is I'm not one of those people that's comfortable throwing up. Like, I know there are people that exist that are, but I am one of those that's like, I would rather just feel like shit and know I'm not going to throw up than throw up and get it over with. Like, that's never going to be me.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
I'm on the concourse trying to get air, and Camden Yards is really well done. Like, if you're on a concourse, you get wind. So it's not, and I'm just like, like hyperventilating, and like my uncle like is checking on me, like water, here's some Tums, all this stuff. And we end up going to my grandfather's instead of coming back, where he's just like, lay down, relax. And he goes into the pharmacy, gets like some Pepsid and like any kind of antacid imaginable he has gotten, right? So we finally leave my grandfather's and we go back to his house, which is an hour from my house. And I'm like, you know what? I just want to get home. So I got home, went to sleep, woke up the next day, and was basically fine. It didn't happen. It was fine. And then, like, I don't know what the period of time in between was, but the next attack was, and this, all right, let's talk about, I'm an old man, right? But this is going to date me and this episode. I had a panic attack while driving past and pulled into a Kmart parking lot. Yes, Kmart used to exist. Like,
it's funny. I thought you were going to say a Blockbuster, but yeah, okay.
I passed a Blockbuster on the way to the Kmart.
There you go.
And I was 10 minutes from home and could not drive. Was just, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, I would walk in and get like a ginger ale and some Tums at the Kmart, and then I'd come back out to my car and just be like, all right, nope, can't do it. And that one was the big one, because then I went to bed and I didn't wake up all right. And I basically lost my appetite and I didn't eat. And I I was just like, what? I don't know what's happening. Like, I ended up going, I haven't been to a doctor in like a decade, but like at this point, I'm like, I'm going to the doctor. And the doctor's like, there's nothing physically wrong with you. Like, and they did like the whole like gastroenterologist thing. Like, they did an they were like, what's going on? Cause I wasn't hungry, but I wasn't eating. And the doctor just goes like, I think it's anxiety. Like, I think it's stress and anxiety. And I was like, well, granted, I'm not happy. Like, I'm a college graduate that works in retail, but I wasn't poor. I wasn't destitute. Like, so like, I don't know what undue stress in my subconscious was going on. But from that moment on, I've basically lived with anxiety.
Wow. Yeah. I wanted to ask, when you were at the baseball park, did you know, like, what did you think was happening? Did you have a feeling it was an anxiety, or were you like, oh, I ate a bad hot dog?
I had, my uncle was the one who kind of was like, it appears you're having a panic attack.
Okay. All right.
If he hadn't said that, or at least up to that point, for like the little bit up to that point, no idea. Like, I'm just like, I just don't feel well. Like it's just like it just doesn't feel well, and it's just unfortunate because when it comes out of nowhere, I knew it wasn't something I ate because it was a day game, and it was like I had coffee and a donut, which I've eaten, like a million of. So clearly, it's not bad coffee or a donut. Like
right. You weren't having oysters and sangria at 8:00 in the morning.
Yeah, no, and one of the unfortunate part is I usually get a crab cake at the stadium, and it was like I'm not. No,
it's not going to happen this time.
and so basically, I've been living with it since. Now I haven't seen anybody. I kind of like worked my way through it. Like I was working retail. I had a bunch of panic attacks in the very beginning while I was at work and had to leave because I was like, I just can't. I can't. And I basically piecemealed just make yourself get through it kind of a scenario where the mall at that time when I was living with my parents was 25 minutes away, and I had to get on the highway to get there. And I was like, all right, if I can get to the mall, I'll buy myself something. Like, it was really like, I'm going to give myself these little challenges, get through this. It's going to be very uncomfortable. And driving changed too, by the way. Like, while I was still panicked driving, I could not be in a passenger seat of a car. I could not be in the back seat of a car. It wasn't until like later that I was like, oh no, no. Like, that's not happening. Meanwhile, like before it was like, what? I never want to drive. I don't want to pay for gas. And now it's like, no, but like getting on the highway especially with 3 miles and a little traffic and no off ramp, I'm like gripping the wheel, panicked. And then I'd get to the mall and it would be like, all right, well, I got here. And then there's like a slight panic of like, I have to do that again to go back. And I'm still like, all right, but I'm going to buy a movie or something, like or a book, whatever. Like I was trying to treat myself and like, just, you have to get out. You can't. And I finally got comfortable going back to work, and it was more of just like getting comfortable. And it got to a point where when I got my first professional job, they still happened all the time, and I can hide them fairly well at this point, and I just have to get used to it. So like the first 2 weeks I was in my professional job, it was like nerve-wracking, and then you just get comfortable. And as long as I'm comfortable, if I go to my next door neighbor's house, I'd probably have a little bit of anxiety. If I go there 5 times, after the 5th time, 4th time, whatever, when I get comfortable over there, fair enough. I'm fine. But it's just been this, I've been figuring it out. And it's like, I got sick of eating Tums all the time.
I bet, yeah.
So I started to replace them, and now I use the Fresh Mint Tic Tacs, because a mint is just like a placebo for me at this point. Right. And it's so much more inconspicuous popping a Tic Tac than popping a Tums. So I can,
absolutely.
But this is now my life, and I have to watch what I eat, because if I have a full meal and then have an anxiety attack, it's so much worse. So I don't eat as much when I'm out, or I don't eat before I go out, or whatever. Like I've basically changed the entire way I live, but I'm still living. I know people listening to this are going to be like, what the, just go get some help, do this, do that, whatever. Like, no, I've managed to kind of get through it, but I do still fondly look back at like before, right? Like, this was never an issue. I didn't have to worry about like, all right, did I eat a little bit? Do I have a water with me? Do I have a ginger ale handy? What's the, like what I checked before I left the house, before I had anxiety, was like my keys and maybe my phone. And now it's like, all right, do I have the Tic Tacs? Do I have a bottle of water? Maybe I should take a can or a bottle of ginger ale with me. Where am I going? Is there going to be a, it's just like, it's a whole new life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you a question. You said when you feel comfortable, that feeling of comfort, is it like a safety thing, or is it like I recognize this thing? I know what's going to happen. Like you said, if you go to your neighbor's house, you'll be a little uncomfortable, but if you go 5 days in a row, by the 5th day, so is it more like, oh, I know how this is going to go, so I there's no huge unknowns coming at me, or is it just a feeling of safety?
You know what? It's a good question. I've never really thought. I think it's familiarity more than anything. It might be okay, I know what to expect here. I mean, I used to do events at my last job, and they were the most nerve-wracking. The only good thing about an event is when you're working an event, your mind doesn't have as much time, but like we would show up early, and when setup was done, in like that little 15-minute lull before like people start arriving, the heart rate starts to go up a little bit. It's like, oh boy. Okay. And because I'm so self-conscious about keeping the stomach in check, because it's the number one symptom I have, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go a little easy on the coffee this morning, or I'm not going to eat as much, or I basically changed everything. It's ridiculous. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was because you also have a before anxiety persona and life that was different, right?
Yeah. So my anxiety, most of it is caused because I have, through multiple concussions, I have scarring on my brain. They actually have the picture, and they go, so where it's pressing on my brain is the place where sometimes rational and irrational and fear and anxiety will manifest. So I kind of went from having the normal anxiety, like you were talking about, the regular, you get a little bit anxious meeting somebody new, being in a place with a lot of people, having to maybe public speak, or, the just the things that make us normally nervous. And I was fine. That didn't bother me. And then it went from that to almost overnight anxiety and not knowing how to handle it at all. And then also having it trigger like a sadness and a depression. One, because I didn't understand what was happening. Two, was when I get anxious, I get really scared that that's how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. Like, this is the time that this is it. It'll never go away. And that was from the first time I really experienced it. And it still happens. Right? Sometimes it's irrational. So it still happens, and I'll get anxious, and it's like, oh no, this is it. I'm done. And I don't get anxious about what most people would think. I will get huge anxiety because I will forget the difference between there, and there. Just totally random, 2:00 in the morning, wake up. We all have computers, cell phones. I could just, and for some reason, my brain just shuts it off. It just like, and then all of a sudden I'm just in this downward spiral of the typical signs of anxiety, right? The rapid heart rate, shallow breathing, sweating, nervous, like I can't figure out which way is up. Everything is terrible. My life is over. I don't know what's happening, all because of that. I'll be in my car driving, and it'll be hot, and I won't want to turn the air conditioning on because I'm afraid the air conditioning pump is going to burn out. Now, I'm in a spot financially. I'm fortunate. I have a newer vehicle. If the air conditioner went out, I am very fortunate. I can afford to just get it fixed. If it was terrible, I could just roll down a window or two. I mean, there's no rationality to it whatsoever, but it will get me to the point where I'm like, I think I need to pull over. I don't think I can drive.
The driving is probably the worst, depending on where you're going, right? Like I've talked about it a little bit on this show, and anybody who's followed me for a while, they know I drove to Michigan with Bill, who put up with a ton, right? Like it's early October, right? But there are times when I'm like, I got to roll the window down a little bit. I need some air. Like, and there are places, especially when you're driving across Pennsylvania or across a state where you're on a highway that it's not like there's a place to pull over every 5 minutes or something, which I don't know. It's probably more rational for like everybody with anxiety, but when you don't have an out, if I'm driving in a city, I know I can pull over anywhere. I can pull into a store, a fast food, doesn't matter. But on a highway, like, it's amped up because you're like, all right, well, I can't pull over. I got to keep going. And
yeah, see, I get a little, this is going to sound really weird, but I have a little bit of, in the anxiety world, a little bit of jealousy about people that know what might set them off. So I'd love to know, like, oh crap, it's going to happen. And I can tell everybody around me, like, I'm going to be a freaking mess because we're getting on the road and I don't handle it well. The thing that really bums me out, and then for me, because I don't know when it's going to happen, I'm always on edge about stuff. And when it does, I get really self-conscious because I know it's going to affect the people around me. Maybe not in a huge way, but I know it's going to happen. And then I beat myself up for that. And then I start to get depressed. So now I'm anxious about something totally asinine and depressed.
So you have it. Are you willing to tell people when it's happening?
Absolutely. I have to.
Okay.
Because it's so random that, I mean, people that are close to me, like if I'm in the store, I'm not going to turn around to the person and go, I'm freaking out right now because this lemon is just blowing my mind,
That's fair.
But with Annalise, with my wife, with my my good friends, my family, I have to say, because there's all of a sudden they'll look at me and they're like, what is going on with you? And I'm staring at something and I'm like, I'm freaking out because I can't remember the part I played in a play in 6th grade. See, and I can't let it go.
And for me, there is still that random nature that's scary. Like, so Jason Zapata and I, who was the 9th guest on this show, and I have been friends for 2 decades now, at least. And Steph and I, the three of us went out for the day. And we had a nice, lunch, and we were driving around, and all of a sudden, I'm driving in the car, and it was, winter. Well, it was cold outside, and all of a sudden, the window goes down, and they both look at me, and I've just got, the white knuckles. I'm not driving, I'm driving around my local haunts. We didn't go anywhere crazy. I'm with my girlfriend and my best friend of 2 decades, and it's just nope, no, it's happening. It's happening. Now, Steph's been around a little bit more, and I've started to I still don't tell, she still gets pissed. I don't tell her every time it happens, but I'm afraid that it will color whatever we're doing for her. So unless it's beyond my control, I kind of just get quiet. Right. I think she's starting to pick up on when it happens, but Zapata had never seen it. So I mean, we're finally living close together again. So for a long time, he wouldn't have seen it anyway, but I'm trying to tell them, I mean, and they want to talk about it, but the last thing you want to do when you're having a panic attack and maybe starting to get sick to your stomach is talk at all. I don't want to I barely want to breathe. I don't want to move. I just, so there is still a random nature, which I don't look around every corner, but it's I make sure I have a water. I make sure I have the few things I know that might mitigate it a little bit, but I really wish I could just flip a switch and go back.
I spend most of my time just trying to accept who I am now. When I'm dealing with my issues or myself, that's the biggest thing, because I really liked, and I like the life I have now, and I'm trying to accept and like who I am, but I really liked who I was before. And I'm not a big fan of this new version as much as I was the other version. And Annalise and I have been together since before this happened. So I also have this fear that this will someday just be too much. And she'll just be like, this isn't who I met. You're not the same person, which is absolutely 100% true. So there's always that. I battle with myself on how much do I share and how much do I keep. And then I just decided, well, if I'm willing to be in a relationship with you, then I need to be willing to let you know the truth so you can make the decisions you need to make. So if you're going to be with me, you're going to be with me for all the stuff I'm going through. Not, oh, I'm going to try and pretend I'm someone I'm not. And then if that's too much, you get to make that decision based on the truth, and not like, if, I'd hate for something to happen and she's like, oh, I've had enough. And then we talk as friends later, and she's like, well, if you would have just told me what was going on, I could have dealt with it, but I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So it was always like out of left field. So, but missing the person I was, I do go to therapy. I have to keep getting checked because of the scarring on my brain. So I have to, have MRIs all the time and have different epilepsy or seizure tests. And so I do go talk to a doctor because I don't know sometimes, like, is this just normal weird stuff? I'm also getting older, or is this like something that's bizarre? And most of the time is spent just trying to figure out that it's okay to let go of that person and just appreciate that I had that life, and then make this one the best that I can with as much acceptance as I can. And I know you were asking, or you did ask, about letting people around me know. That has started to help me in the sense that then I don't feel as weird just shutting something down. Like if I'm like, I just can't do this right now, then everyone's like, oh, it's not because you don't want to do it. You're just having a hard time. And it's usually like little silly things, like I just can't make dinner right now. I'm so, fortunately, like going out and being around people and traveling, I'm fortunate that I feel comfortable doing that. But it might be like, oh, if we're in Vegas or Reno, it might be like, I just need to go back to the room.
See, and I've been deflecting because, like, I know I can't do those big ticket things. Mm-hmm. I know a road trip is possible, but it won't be fun, right? And I know getting on a plane is probably not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, like, if we want to go out to dinner and I start to get anxious, like, I'm just like, I just don't feel like it. And I try not to use, like, I try not to use anxiety as a crutch, but I'm basically using everything else. Like, right. I don't feel like it. Oh, I got work to do tonight. Like, oh, I got so-and-so, like, so there are these things, and I'm trying a little bit more to be honest, but if I was as honest as I should be, people, I don't know, like, it's that fear of like, well, I'm holding you back, like, mm-hmm. or cause it's never myself. I'm completely comfortable not doing something, but like, yeah. it's like, oh, my parents want to take us out to dinner, or like, so, it's like, yeah. And I know I can, quote unquote, toughen through it because I have, but that's not a happy life. No, it's not a happy life. Yeah. And it's also not like oh, good, you got to have fun and I was there. Like,
mm-hmm. and it's not like, I know I can tough out through this workout or this run or not eating sugar for a year. This isn't something where you come out on the other side and you're like, oh, great. You're going to tough it out and feel terrible, and you're not getting any benefit. It's not like if I did this 17 times, it would totally go away. If I told you, hey, if you fly 17 times, on the 18th time, you'd be fine. You'd be like, okay, then I can tough that out.
Yeah.
But to know at the 17th, you're going to feel the same you did on the first and be miserable.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think that's what's difficult for people that don't have anxiety, or sometimes don't have any sort of mental issue with, whether it's depression or anything else, that it doesn't get better. It would be great if it did, but and for some of us, some people, they can't take medication, and depression can get better. But in that time, it's one of those things like, no, this is who I am. Like, for me, it's that accepting. It's like, no, this is it. This is how it's going to be. There are things I can't do like I did, and it is hard. It can be devastating to me, and I've got to be really careful not to go into that looking back the whole time and just going, well, this is this is who you are. So do what you can and enjoy what you can, and put the people around you that are willing to do that with you or for you, or however you want to look at it. It's like if all of a sudden I was hanging out with a bunch of marathon runners, they probably wouldn't want to hang out because I don't run marathons, so it's like, why am I going to try to hang out with marathon runners?
There's 2 Mile Neil.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they'd be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm playing guitar. And they're like, no, we're going for a run. And I'm like, no, I'm playing guitar. It's like, well, maybe, surround myself with people that understand or accept the crazy. Well, I call it crazy, and I'm not trying to put it down. It just, for me, it's a fun word. I don't view it as a negative thing. Yeah. So I'm not trying to offend anybody out there, but my own craziness and what's in my head is surround people with go like, oh yeah, okay, we get that. At the same time, I don't limit anyone around me or Annalise or my friends or my family for if I'm like, oh, I can't do this thing right now because this lemon is freaking me out. And I'm like, well, you go do the thing. And I'm just going to stare at this lemon for 2 hours and we'll figure it out later. Fortunately, I'm not at a place where I'm like, I can't do this, so I don't want you to do it either.
Yeah, I think that I spent enough time alone before Steph came into my life where I was, I'd get invited to places and I'd be like, nah, you guys do your thing. And I know that at a certain point it becomes like, oh, we're just not going to invite him. He never comes out. But I'm now surrounded with people that don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. So like I can say no and I know they'll still ask, which is very nice. Mm-hmm. Especially because there are times I have to say no. Like, and it goes to the irrational nature of it to the X degree, because it's like, these are people I like doing a thing I like at a place where I'm comfortable, and I'm just not feeling it. Like, it's just, nope, not like, and it's just something, it's literally like a before and after, and it's hard. I don't think about the before until I'm having conversations or explaining it to people, because they're like, oh, well, how'd you get through high school? Be like, well, I didn't have it then. Like, and then, well, what caused it? I don't know. I was at a baseball game. Like, it's not like I was thinking of, I wasn't trying to like save a man's life and failed miserably. And I've been, it's just, I was at a baseball game when it happened for the first time. Like, oh my God, there was a man on first and he took off and the pitch came in and no. Like, it's like, there was nothing rational about it at all. If anything, like, I was very excited to be where I was at that moment. And then it's just like, well, now I've got a different thing in front of me.
Yeah, it's funny when people ask you, and they say, "Well, what caused it?" You should just say, "Oh, people asking me questions."
I try to be forthcoming about it too. Like, I'm still looking for a job. I've been networking with people, but when I get to a point where we might be talking about like a potential job, I'm just, all right, hold on. Like, even though you're going to pay me, I can't get on a plane right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that will change, but at the moment I can't. And I do have anxiety, but I can get through it. But I'm being honest with you and upfront right now, because I don't want to get a scenario where, like, it's taken me a while. Like, when I finally find a job, I'm going to try and hold on to it as much as possible. The last thing I want to do is, oh yeah, I can do anything. And then they're going to be like, all right, well, stand on one leg. You're like, I can't stand on one leg. It just so I try to be upfront. So I have talked about it with, I guess, quote unquote strangers a little bit more often. I mean, the people I'm networking with or the potential, employers, they're not friends. I mean, I might know them, but not to that level. And I would love to say to the people listening to this, like, talking about it helps. It doesn't hurt. I'm never going to say like, oh, like, this is horrible. Like, and I don't get anxiety talking about anxiety unless I've already having an attack. But it's just, I always go back to it. Like, it's just irrational. So there's going to be no, and it being irrational means there's no salve. It's just not like there's one, oh my God, I pop a Tic Tac, I'm fucking fine. No, it helps me calm down. With like, So when I got a Fitbit, Steph got me the one that monitors your heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been unemployed, and my last temporary job was working from home. So like I still have them at home, but not as much. But when I would have them when I'm out, the first thing I do is look and see what my actual heart rate is. Because I know it's going up. Like I can feel it. And I feel like it's probably I should probably take the Fitbit off, right? Because like I feel the heart rate going. I feel flushed and like feverish. I don't need to look down and realize that I've been sitting for an hour and my heart rate's 115. Like that's like that's not that, but I don't know why. I always look now. Like,
yeah.
What is it? Oh, that wasn't as bad as 3 weeks ago when it was 120. Like, I'm making it a contest with myself to see like, oh, it's not, but when you're in it, like you're in it, there is nothing else. It's the alpha, it's the omega, it's everything. It doesn't.
It consumes you. It is. You and the anxiety are one. It's very hard for me to explain because I didn't get it. I mean, I had friends that had anxiety growing up, and I was as supportive as I could be. And in the back of my head, I definitely had that. Oh my gosh, get over it. Not in a negative way, but in the I can help you. Oh, come on, it's not. We can go to the movies. It's not that bad.
We can just talk it out. People. Yeah, we'll just talk it out. It'll be fine.
Right. And I have a friend now that doesn't like to go out a lot, and I ask all the time. And, he asked me once, like, why do you keep asking? And I said, it's just so you know. I mean, I know you're going to say no. Maybe one day you won't. But it's just so you know that I think about that. Like, I want you there, and I want that little bit for you. Hey, I'm not upset that you say no, but I want that comfort inside you to go like, oh, I'm not being forgotten about. Like, I'm thought about for these things, even though I don't go. Because to me, that helps me. If I'm having a bad day or I'm in a bad situation, to know that person's like, cool, we'll try again tomorrow, or don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. I mean, I know being told don't worry when you're worrying doesn't help, but there's something kind about it coming from somebody. When you look back and go, oh, that was nice. They meant that in a positive way. But it is very difficult to explain to somebody just how you absolutely lose who you are in this moment that you can never explain super rational. In a rational way, I should say. Yeah,
I mean, the closest thing I can come to even attempting to explain it is when you're super sick, like food poisoning, all you can think about is how you feel. And you don't feel well, which is what you're now thinking about, is that you don't feel well, right? And that's the closest cycle I can come to, except you didn't eat a bad burrito. Like,
right.
You aren't super hungover. You were fine a minute ago, and now you're not.
Yeah, for me, it's that it's hard unless somebody's been in the situation, but unless you've surfed or when you learn how to swim, and there's that feeling where your head keeps going underwater and you don't know that you're going to be okay because you haven't been in that situation. It's that feeling of total loss of control. And at the same time, people telling you like, you think you're drowning, you don't know which way is up. And then somebody says like, oh, who do you think will win the World Series next year? And you're like, I am so not there. I'm afraid I'm dying, Yeah. But to everyone else, they're like, it's only 3 feet, stand up. And you're like, to me, it's not. To me, it's a 20-foot pool with sharks and all this stuff.
I can't control my legs. What do you mean stand up? I don't.
Yeah.
What legs? Like,
yeah, it's really hard, and it has certainly given me a lot of empathy towards people that have suffered through anxiety or with anxiety for their whole lives. Because I that's when I feel fortunate, because I had all this time, and again, my anxiety is a little bit different, so I don't have the fear part of it all the time of like, oh my gosh, we have to go to this, whatever it is,
Yeah.
And I have to get into the car and I have to do this, because if I don't, all these people will be disappointed in me, whether it's a holiday, a wedding, a funeral, whatever, those things you kind of have to go to. So I don't have that. And I do have that, like, to look back and go, oh, this hasn't been my whole life. And it makes me, when I can sit in that, it makes me feel better about where I'm at, because I'm like, oh, I got to experience all this stuff without all this fear and anxiety. And now I just have to deal. And for me, I always feel like it's much, I mean, for me, it's huge, but on the grand scale of what some people go through, like some of the things you talk about and have talked about, and the things I know about, because obviously I know you out of podcasting, it's been years now. It's like, wow, that's tough. The plane thing isn't going to happen, might never happen. But I know that takes a mental toll too, because it's hard to say, for me, it's hard to say, like, I can't do that, not because of a physical, liability or disability, or not because of a financial one, but because my mind won't let me do that.
Yeah.
And that can take a huge toll. And it's like, I think about you and other friends that go through that and think, wow, that is tough. That's tough. As much as we want it not to be tough, and as much as we say, well, we won't do those things, which is a great way to take care of yourself, there's still that voice in the back of your, like for me, in the back of my head going, why can't I do those? Why can't I just let me do that freaking thing? Let me do it once and feel fine. And then I don't care if I ever do it again, but let me just do that.
Yeah. I've come to I don't know if they're realizations so much as they're rationalizations, which is I've lowered my expectations is one, right? Mm-hmm. So while, yes, I still have a blog and I still launched a podcast, and those some people can consider lofty. For me, those are creative outlets, and I don't see them as taking chances. So I've lowered, like, I keep my expectations where they should be there. But socially, it's like, one day I would love to drive across the country. Mm-hmm. Given where I'm at with anxiety right now, I would need to be independently wealthy. So that way, if I had a panic attack in Iowa, I could just stay an extra day in Iowa and still make it to see you in California, right? Like, it's going to be another day, as opposed to, like, you get 2 weeks off. I got a week to get out there and a week to come back. Like, no, because if I have a breakdown mentally somewhere along the way, I need the extra time. So so it's little trips that I know, even if I have to pull over for a half hour, I can make it there in an hour, So I've lowered that. And then the other part of it is, like, I've become comfortable and happy with the life I lead. So while I can't get on a plane, I'm not unhappy because I can't get on a plane. Because that's the other way to look at it. It's, oh, fuck, my life is shit because I can't fly to California. It's like, no, my life's not shit. I could still talk to Neil if I want to. It's not like my friend. Podcasting is great in that we now have friends all over. And I know some would like to see me more often than they do, but most of them know about this. And if they don't, they do now. But knowing that, okay, you're my friend and we're good. Like, even if it's just a text or a phone call and I'll never be able to give you a hug, we're still fucking friends. It's fine. And so, like, having those expectations lowered a little bit for myself, because I don't expect you to come here. Like, it's not like, oh, well, you make the effort. Like, I'm not going to be that way. You know what I mean? So, like,
it's funny you mentioned that, because it's kind of cool, because in my head while you were saying that, I'm like, the amazing thing is I can go there. All of that stuff that maybe you can't do, fortunately for because my anxiety is different, I can do that. So those things can still happen. And I think the big change for me, like we were talking about, the empathy and the understanding, is now, like, I wouldn't want you to even try to do it if you weren't 100% on wanting to try to do it, because I'm like, it's just so much easier for me to go there. And then knowing, like, hey, I may go that way, and you're like, cool, we might only hang out for 5 minutes in person because something might come up for you, and I'll totally get that. I'll be like, that's worth it. That's totally fine. I get it. I'm going to go stress out about my lemons now. So we'll talk later. But I think that's hard for some people to understand how huge that can be, because you wouldn't ask. But I know for me, when somebody says like, oh, that's not working, or you're having a hard time right now, let's just do this. It's huge for me mentally, because I like I said, I do beat myself up so much for when the anxiety hits me. I'm like, it's just this spiral of, why can't I stop thinking about this right now? For me, it's usually a thought. It's not necessarily, I'm not a big fan of crowds, usually because I'm afraid something will happen and I'll be exposed. And then all these people that whole sanctimonious, grandiose vision of myself, I think that everybody around is going to notice what's going on with me. Well, no one really will. But in that moment, that's that feeling of, oh my God, I'm freaking out about this word or this thing or whatever. And all these people now know. So that's when I get nervous and I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because I'm afraid this thing that I can't control is going to happen.
And see, for me, it's the same words, but in a different order. Like crowds for me, it's because I can't control anybody else. And I'm not that I would want to, but just like that person could throw a thing like that oh my God, like it might be too crowded. Like I might not have enough personal space, which is the number one way to get me going. Like,
sure.
Just, like, have me in a cramped space.
And hot, and you're like,
yeah, it's that thing where it's like, well, I know this. So I don't try and avoid those situations, because sometimes they're unavoidable, right? Like, I don't not go to the movies. Do I enjoy movies better when I'm not in a full theater? 100% I enjoy movies when I'm not in a full theater. But it doesn't mean I can't take in a movie in a full theater. It just, I prefer to sit on the aisle. It gives me that one little bit of control, right? So I don't sit in the middle. Now, I'll sit in the middle of an empty theater, but if I see there's starting to people, like, I don't know, like, if everybody's theaters are like this, but I always go for, like, the little side section where there's, like, 3 on the outside of the aisle. I always sit there.
Right, kind of like the wings?
Yep, because I know most people don't want to sit on the wall, and I'm good. Like, I'm not going to be, at most, I'm one person away from the aisle. Good. I have a little bit of control, so if something happens, I can get out. But it's just those little things that like we think about, and I say we because like the other thing is, the more open I've been about it, the more I've heard other people. I mean, you walk around, I would guess most people have some kind of anxiety. Now, mine manifested itself before the current social media was a huge thing. And like, I know all this stuff amps it up, but because I'm open to talk about it, or at least I'm not hiding it, like, oh my God, like it's a secret, bury it. I've had genuinely comforting conversations with people who don't necessarily understand what I'm going through, but are going through something on a much smaller level. And I can give them my tips and what I do, because like, maybe it'll help them. And I wouldn't call myself an advocate. Like, I wouldn't go that far, but I'm supportive at any level. I've found most people are that either know someone that has anxiety or have it themselves. People that are completely oblivious, like it hasn't touched their circle. It's not that they don't believe you, but there's no understanding.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was that person for a while. I thought I was helping. I also noticed the difference, like you said, in giving advice. I think people that have anxiety and sometimes with depression, things like that, is as opposed to telling somebody what we think they should do, is we say what we do. Like, oh, when I'm feeling blah, 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 I'll do this, and sometimes it helps. Like, I've gone to a bunch of classes and bought a bunch of books on, working on my breathing and mindfulness and this and that, just a lot of times just so I can go back to sleep, And so it's interesting how your vocabulary changes when all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have no idea what'll work for you. This might never work for you, but I focus on this one point in the room, and I start thinking of these two colors bouncing back and forth, which is actually something I do. And for some reason, that takes up all the space in my mind because I'm looking at one thing while trying to make these two things move in and out, and that works. And it's also neat because then people go, oh, cool, I'll try it, because having anxiety, you would do anything to pull yourself out. I mean, if somebody told me like, oh, I sometimes like to find an octopus in a seafood market and just rub it gently, I'd be like, I'm going to go buy an octopus right now. I'm going to go get one, and I'm going to rub an octopus.
First of all, you're absolutely right, but I feel like it's less altruistic than like being nice and not being like, this is what you should do. I think it's because when we have those feelings, it's so us and personal. I would never be able to tell anybody anything other than what I do. Like, there is no world outside. So, like, while it ends up being altruistic, it's like, no.
Right. This is all I got. So here you go. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It is well, I'm curious to know for you, when you realized it wasn't going to go away, that this was going to be part of you. What was that realization like, and how deep into it? Like, because I would imagine, like the first time at the park, and then that big one at Kmart. Like, what was that? Were you knowing then, or did you know then, or how long did it take where you're like, oh crap, this is staying with me. This isn't just some weird thing.
It was, so after all of the doctor's appointments where it was like, you're perfectly healthy, which is the worst. First of all, like the worst thing anybody can tell you. Like, I understand, like, it's great to be perfectly healthy, but when you feel, when you've had an anxiety attack for no reason, as irrational as we said it is, and the doctor with the degree on the wall says there's nothing physically wrong with you, you're like, oh fuck. Like,
that's the one that's harder for me than you're perfectly healthy. At least has something to it. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, there's something wrong with me, even if it's in my head, because I'm here telling you there's something wrong with me. That means there's something wrong with me.
I think it was just when I started to venture back out and I saw that I was making some progress, but not a ton. And then I got to the point where I could be a functional person in society despite, and I say despite because I wasn't living with it at the time. It was, I'm doing all of this in spite of. And just the idea that no matter how long I went, there always seemed to be another one. And it would be like, oh, it's been 2 weeks. I've been fine. And then just, and you don't think about it. You go about your daily life. You know, one day fades into a week, fades into a month. But over the course of a year, it continued to happen irregularly and irrationally to a point where I was like, and after a couple years of that, it was just like, okay, I just have to be comfortable with this. I can't, and at the, it was before like smartphones. So I immediately, like at a certain point, like a year in, I basically put together my emergency contacts on my original like Motorola Razr, where you could like have speed dial contacts on one for each number. And it was like, it wasn't mom, dad, girlfriend. It was, here are the 4 friends I know I'll get one of guaranteed. And those were the first 4. And that was when it was still really bad. And it was like, all right, I'm in the parking lot of a gas station. I'm freaking out. How's your day going? And then we just talk for 15 minutes and I'd try and like take my mind off it and whatever. And I don't know, like I'd love to say like I kind of got over it. I think I just kind of ended up getting used to it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You know, if the threat is that the monkey's on your back, you just kind of get used to the monkey being on your back. Mm-hmm. And that was, I don't know. It just kind of became the norm. You know, I didn't have it. It became a big deal. And then I tried to get out in the world and it became my new normal, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was interesting for me because because of the concussion. So how the whole thing started for me was that the first thing that happened is I was at home, I had the day off, and I started smelling burnt plastic, which is usually right, the burnt toast, burnt plastic, having a stroke thing. So I didn't know that was going on, but I was drinking coffee and I'm like, I wonder if the coffee machine like is melting in itself because I smell, you know, and a couple days ago and I'd ask her, I'm like, do you smell that? And she's like, no. And I'm like, huh. And then I was having a hard time gripping things and like things would just fall out of my hand. And I'm like, what is going on? So that's why I originally went to the doctor, was like, something's going on. And then really like had an MRI. And then after the first MRI, at that time, I unfortunately had a bunch in the past too for all the head injuries. But before I knew about the scarring on the brain, I started getting my anxiety. So it was this really weird thing where there was physical things, olfactory things. There was all this stuff going on. And then on top of that, I started just stressing out and being super, you know, having this anxiety about these random things. And then having all these tests and finding out, well, this is why it's happening. So there for me, and why I wanted to know for you, it's like I never had that moment that this is just part of it, because I was told, yeah, like we can try to help to change how the pathway that your neurons take around your brain to help with the scarring, but no, this is it. You know, it's almost like you do go to the doctor and they go, something's definitely wrong with you. You know, your arm is broken. You know, it was interesting to be, sit there, and I was hoping for you're perfectly healthy. You know, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm just having whatever. I'm going through something because I'm getting older or whatever. And to have them go like, oh no, you're messed up. I was like, what do you know? And they're like, no, it'll never be the same. You're messed up. It's fine. And I'm like, what is going on right now? I wanted that glimmer of hope of just like, you're working too much, or maybe you're sad, or maybe you're, there's this, maybe you're, I don't know, unhappy about something. No, it was like, no, your brain is broken. We've seen this a lot of times. It's going to get so much worse from here. I'm like, that's lovely. Thanks. I like that a lot.
Do you have happy places where this is a safe space? Like you're never gonna, like nothing bad's gonna happen. Like you won't have an attack, or you're less likely to have an attack either when you're here in this place or doing this thing.
Yes. For the anxiety, it doesn't seem to happen when I'm really busy. Like if I'm really busy and my mind is occupied, I haven't, or I don't recall having it where like all of a sudden the brakes get pumped and I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out about this thing. The physical stuff, the weird smells and the grip thing, no, that there's no getting away from that. Okay. It's just part of the deal. But it's interesting that, the happy places for me are usually when I'm most stressed out and busy trying to take care of a problem. So it can be like a financial thing. It could be I'm working on the cars. It could be, sadly, like, my dad had surgery on his back and he wasn't recovering well. And there was all this stress, like, is he going to be okay? Or if something happens to one of our dogs or something like that, then it doesn't seem to happen because my mind is racing so much around this other thing. But it's in the quiet times for me. It's when I want to be relaxed and everything's, I'm going to sleep, or I'm just waking up, or I'm driving, or there isn't a lot of noise in my brain, and then it will just latch on to something, and then I'm done. I mean, I'm done. I can't do anything.
So I'm with you there, like, because when I mean, people call me a workaholic, and maybe I've kind of eased into it because I didn't, when I first started having anxiety, I didn't have the blog. I started a business that I still have as like a side gig, and I didn't even have that at the time. Right. And then I started the business, and the business kind of became the blog. And there's always something to write. There's always something to do. There's always something to research, whatever. And so the busier I am, the less my mind can wander almost. And if you put me in an awkward situation, there's a very good chance it doesn't matter how busy I am. I'm still going to feel a little uneasy. But
right.
The busier I can keep my brain, the better off I am. The truth of the matter is, this past year, Steph and I took a vacation. And I'll tell you what, the anxiety level is pretty high. But it was my first vacation in like a decade, because I used to use my vacation days for Agent Palmer. And it sounds kind of like whatever, but it was like, no, I'll take Friday off and go see the Star Wars movie, because I'm not going to see it Thursday night, but I'll see it Friday, and then I'll write about it, and then, go into the weekend. Or I'll take the Monday off and, do a little extra research for this post I'm working on. That's how I used to use my vacation as it came. So I wasn't taking legit breaks, but I didn't feel like I needed them either. Everybody gets around the holidays, right? Whether you get a week, 2 weeks, whatever, I would look at that and go, all right, time to get prepped for the next year. And I'd write my blog schedule for the next year. And I've always been that way. So it's the winding down that scares me the most. I've found it now where even reading isn't enough of an exercise. I'll be reading a book I enjoy, and my mind will start going you have to start on that project. I'm trying to read a book here.
Yeah.
But the busier I am, the better off I seem to be.
Now, I have noticed this for me, and I'm curious for you. So I will keep my mind occupied or be busy and this and that. But that first break after a super busy time, it'll come at me hard. It's almost, I know it doesn't work in the way that it builds up. That's not the thing. And I don't know if that's because I felt quote unquote normal for so long that it just feels like it's a bigger deal, or if it is a bigger deal because I felt normal for so long. Does that make any sense?
No, I think it's just because I think you and I are both resigned to the fact that we have this, but it doesn't take long to get used to not having it. So if you get a good month where you're super busy and you don't feel any anxious at all, that one Sunday when you sit down and then it starts to creep back in, it's kind of I like to think of it like running, because I don't run year round. So that first run in the fucking spring is always horrible. Right? And basically I think that's what it is. That first little hint at an attack is always worse after a period of not having it. Because
that makes sense, because it's almost the reminder of, this is still sure. That makes sense.
I think that's it. Or at least that's the way I would put it. Listen, I tried running. I was unemployed for a good portion of this past spring and summer, and I was like, I'm home. I have no reason not to run. This is going to be great. I'm going to be the healthiest boy I've ever been. Maybe physically, but mentally, no difference. I would love to be like, oh, that's the key. Because it's one of those weird things. We talk about irrationality. I'm still looking for the cure-all. Oh, if I get 8 hours of sleep every night, I'm guaranteed not to have anxiety. No. I try. I really do, but that's not going to happen.
No, and I do think, and advice that has been given to me, by doctors is for my anxiety, it's just live, and you'll know when it doesn't feel right. When it doesn't feel right, back off and put yourself in a good spot. And that's all you can do. And it's funny because if you think about like any sort of limitation, that's, you know, if your arm hurts, it's like, well, just use it. And when it hurts too much, stop using it and, you know, let it heal and we'll go from there. But it's like I said, for me, accepting it has been the hardest thing. I think harder than actually having the anxiety.
I don't know if I've even accepted it now because I just compartmentalized it and started working on something else, which is probably not that healthy. But at this point, I feel like I've rationalized that it's a part of me now. But I really did just move on. Like, oh, fuck. Well, okay. Well, I can't leave the house. So all right, I'll read a book or I'll, you know, do this, do that.
I will say this too. One thing that helps me and that I do like a lot is that the people around me that know me and care about me don't pretend I don't have this thing going on. That to me means a lot. Like if I'm not in a good headspace and somebody sees it, it actually makes me feel better when somebody says, "Oh, what's going on with you?" I can tell something's up. That for some reason that helps more than the person that goes like, "Oh no, really? I didn't even know." And I'm like, that makes me feel so isolated and alone because I'm like, really? Because this is this terrible thing and you don't even, I don't know why, you know, which is funny because my whole thing is I don't want to be seen as a person who has this, but it feels so good to me when people are like, "Oh, we get it. I can see it." Yeah, I mean, as much as I miss who I was, there's a little bit of comfort when people go like, "Oh yeah, you are different now." I don't know why, but for me that actually helps in a way. Like, I guess it's that like, oh, it's not just in my head. It's not this weird thing that I'm not making it up. I'm not pretending. Not that people do, but I guess for me, it's like I can't make sense of it. So it's like, since it is in my head and I can't show somebody, well, I guess I could show the MRIs, but I can't show somebody the broken bone. It's nice. There's something about it that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, cool. I got you. I see that."
I'm starting to warm up to that idea. But there's so little anybody else can do that this is the most unhealthy thing I think I've said all night. I feel like a burden by being like, "Oh no, I have an anxiety attack now." And while that is the most unhealthy thing I've said tonight, I'm starting to get to a point where, or I shouldn't say that. It's not me. Steph is starting to get to a point where I can't hide it anymore. Which is probably the healthiest thing that's happened for the both of us.
I was going to say, it's probably really, really good for her too.
Yeah. But, you know, I do still try and tough it out. We try and have a weekly date night. And if I'm not feeling it on a date night, I still try and go out. You know, like I still try and do things because maybe it'll get comfortable. Maybe this time it'll be different. I mean, it's been years now and it's not, but like I'm still willing to try because that's the safer thing, you know, and so I'll suggest like, okay, we're not going to go to the restaurant that's far away from the house. We'll go to the one that's closer, you know, like little things. So if I do have a panic attack, the drive home's not an hour, you know? All right, fair enough. I only have to suffer a little bit after dinner, so maybe it won't be as bad.
Yeah, no, well, and that's good. I do think in certain situations and with certain people that sometimes going through the difficult, like, you know, we were saying earlier, like, don't come out here, you know, and put yourself through all that when I can, you know, go there. But I think was obviously with Steph and like for me and Annalise, sometimes putting yourself through that, even though it's not the most fun, looking back, I think it gives, like for me, it would give me that, oh, well, at least that person can see that I'm trying and I'm willing to put myself in that situation for them. Not that they'd ever ask me to.
Yeah.
But that my willingness to do that shows that I'm here, I'm present, I'm here with you, and I'll try as opposed to just not even putting ourselves in a situation that's uncomfortable because we're just so far removed from wanting to be uncomfortable.
So I talked a little bit about the road trip, which was the first time I met Steph in the flesh. And it was also Podtoberfest, and Bill and I were the quote unquote producers. And I feel like now that we've talked this whole thing through, it was the work. We didn't get in the car and drive to Michigan with all 24 hours ready to go. We were in the car putting it together, and then we got there a day early and spent the day before just prepping everything and getting everything ready. And then it happened, and it was day 1 and it was day 2. And but then massive, the day we were supposed to leave, I couldn't get to sleep that night because I just felt like, and that was the letdown, right? We're done. Right. There's nothing more to do. And it's just ugh. And then I suffered through, the drive back was worse. It was so worse that we split it up. We couldn't even do it in one go. And now that we've talked this out, it makes so much sense because I was just too busy. I was just compartmentalizing it, which again, also not healthy, but it's just what happened. So I feel like that's what kind of made it a thing. And and
then you get to that quiet point, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh. It's like you almost needed we got to put something together to work on the whole way back, If I could just edit in the car for hours, it would be great.
Before I get any further, I want to reiterate and make sure everyone knows again that neither Neil nor I are medical professionals, nor are we trying to give out medical advice. We are talking about living with our anxiety, and we are explaining what works for us to pass an attack or get through the day, what preemptive measures we might take, or what reactive measures we might use to mitigate an attack or episode of high anxiety in any form. None of this is medical advice. Again, please do not mistake it as such. This is what works for us. Now, this episode was a bit harder to edit and harder to listen back to on account of how honest I was, which was part of the reason Neil was perfection personified as a guest on this episode, because he not only understands, he's a friend who I can talk to about this. Not just because he experienced anxiety as well, but because, as you heard during this episode, he's extremely empathetic. Now, it may seem like Neil and I don't have equal time, but in truth, Neil's been open and talked about his anxiety before on his own show, so he's got it down to a more succinct story, whereas mine was more maybe overly detailed than it needed to be, but I also felt like I had to get it out. Neil also brought some humor, acting as the sugar to help the serious topic of, anxiety go down a little lighter. To me, this felt like the most selfish, therapeutic, and honest episode that I've ever done, and may ever do. And having a friend in Neil on, not just as a guest, made it easier to open up and let it all come out. And for that, I can't thank him enough. We discussed a little bit about talking to other people who understand. And in this case, understanding is just dealing with our own anxieties. We don't have to have the same symptoms, issues, or resolutions. We know the journey and we've walked the path, and that's enough to create a common dialogue and, even in some cases, friendship. If you've ever dealt with anxiety for yourself or someone you care about, know that you are not alone. If you've listened this far, I hope you already realize that fact. And if you want to share your stories, Neil and I are both easily accessible and open to discussion. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 13. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet the podcast at The Palmer Files, myself at Agent Palmer, and reach this week's guest Neil at AngelsFreak7. You can hear him on the Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks podcast wherever you are listening to this right now, and you can even watch him over on YouTube at the Halos and Heathens channel. And of course, There's also old episodes of the Reasons Are Several podcast you can listen to as well, wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and remember, all of these links will be available in the show notes. If you're interested in sending email to the show, it's thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. Let me know what you're thinking. And don't forget, you can also hear more of me in the meantime on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast with host Chris Maier, and my other gig as co-host of the Podcast Digest with Dan Lizette. All right, Neil, do you have one final question for me?
I do. If you had to get rid of one color, so you and society would never see this color again, what color would that be? And I'm not going to go into like, well, if you get rid of a primary color, then that gets rid of every, it's not that deep. It's just that one color.
I want to say red.
Mm-hmm.
Just because on the off chance that when it disappears, so does like the phrasing of like, I'm so mad I'm seeing red, and maybe everybody just calms down.
When you said that, that's the first thing that came to my head was the Warrant song I Saw Red, because I'm like, that would be gone, as well as that, I thought of Redline and being so angry you see red. That's so hilarious.
Maybe that would calm everybody down.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I like that. That's good. I was for me, just the one color or lack of color, but again, this has nothing to do. There's no socio-political, racial tones of this. But I always thought it would be interesting to get rid of black, because all of that stuff that we see that is black would now have to be an actual color. Tires, all these things are just easier to have. I mean, the sky at night would be different. All these things would just be eliminated.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, for a moment that flashed through my head, but I was like, I don't know what, I'm a big physical book reader. So I was like, I don't know if I could read a novel in red ink. Like, I just don't know if I could do that.
Bright orange. You're like, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. What is something I could say to you right now that would make you feel good?
I think just hello. Like, I mean, I know that that's the question in this moment, but I feel like just for me, anytime anybody picks up the phone, like whatever the greeting is, because you took my call, like that's all I need.
There you go. Well, let me say this. Hey, Palmer.
Thanks, Neil.
There you go.